Vision for the future. Well, as the Danish proverb says, making predictions is hard, particularly about the future. So I'm going to perhaps start by looking back, and if we think a little bit about John Goodacre's talk, and you might feel a little depressed. You look back 60 years, and all of these problems were there then, and here we are, standing in 2024 with the same problems, right? And you think, aren't we able to apply these techniques? Will they ever be able to be applied? So I think I would come at things a little more nuanced and a little more positively. I mean, if we look back when, in the 70s and the 60s, these machines weren't in your pocket running your bank account. We now have phones doing that. We didn't have computers running operational technology, all our power grids, all of that stuff wasn't happening, or your cars. They weren't networked, so there wasn't easy access for people who wanted to do bad things to those machines. A lot of that has come relatively recently, right? So I think that's one thing to note. So yes, it's a 10 trillion problem overall, cybercrime estimated to be. That's huge. And we obviously need to do something about it. But the other good news is that we have the technologies. We have in the lab back in the day, 1970, 1976, whatever, the CAP sort of system that we saw in Robert's presentation. I mean, that was in the lab. It's the stuff that's well away from actual deployment. Whereas now we have, in terms of strong memory safety techniques, memory safe languages like Rust. You have formal methods that have improved massively. A slightly out of taxonomy point, but you've got compartmentalization of one sort or another, and then you have, of course, memory safety techniques, deterministic, non-probabilistic memory safety techniques like CHERI, which are now at the point where they can, be adopted. So I think that's a really, positive thing that yes, there's an adoption problem, and that's in the tagline of this conference. It's from research to industry. But we're well along that route, and we have the tools and we have the technology to sort of be able to do that. The next point, and it's a non-trivial point, maybe different people think of this different ways, but for me it is quite important. My work with low risk is kind of practical philanthropy, as it were. I do it pro bono. We are on the side of the angels here. So if you think about $10 trillion a year being lost to cyber attacks in one form or another, and if you think, and this is fuzzy math, but let's put it as an upper bound, that 2/3 of those could be one way or other, maybe not as much as that, but something of that order be mitigated through these types of technologies that we're talking about here that we can use. We know that they're technically feasible and they have very little in terms of implementation overhead. That's something like 6 trillion a year saved for the economy worldwide, that money that could go to positive things rather than into the hands of criminals. And just to put a context on that, the UK's GDP is 4 trillion, right? The total illegal drugs trade in the world is 5 trillion. All of the sort of disasters, natural disasters that occur worldwide, 500 billion, right? So we're talking about technology that can redirect money for good. And in that context, I think there's also, if you think about government action and so on, the point was made earlier about net zero, when there was a switch that got flipped and people suddenly started taking it seriously. Estimates vary wildly, but by 2030, some of the estimates are, or 2050, sorry, but the estimates are that sort of climate change could cost 3 or 4 trillion a year. So, bigger societal shifts have happened with less obvious answers for, less immediate, cost effectively. So I think the technology is there. This is one quiver, arrow in the quiver. There are others, right, like Rust, so they're all complementary. And the costs are definitely there to be mitigated, and we know that this works, this technology. And so now it is a question of, and it's not a trivial question, but it is a question of implementing that. And I think it's a good thing for everyone, broadly speaking, if we do that. So I'm sort of encouraged, first of all, that's one thing. The next sort of point I would just make, and this is not a long speech, but the next point I would make is that, we are now in a position, which we weren't a year ago, to answer the question, sort of Henry Kissinger's famous question, but with respect to CHERI, he said once, who do I, call when I want to speak to Europe? That question's been solved subsequently, but for CHERI, there was no single group that represented cross-ISA, government, the academic sector, non-profits, for-profits, cross-ISA, cross-products. There's no single voice. We have that single voice now. It's growing. This is our inaugural sort of conference event. We hope there'll be others. But it's fantastic this forum has come together. but we're able to speak as a single voice to things like standardization, to that paper that Robert Watson et al. is talking about, where you're saying, well, how can we even ask for memory safety? We didn't have the vocabulary. I mean, do you mean type safety? Do you mean memory safety? Do you mean deterministic, non-deterministic? Is ASLR okay? Or has it got to be something different? What's good enough? So things like that is really valuable that we have this group. And also we can work with each other. So I think collaborative engineering, between ourselves is really important to minimize barriers to entry and to help multiple products and multiple startups and multiple large companies embrace and improve this technology. So I'm encouraged, really encouraged about where we're at. And I think the future overall looks really bright. So thank you everybody for participating. We hope to have more events like this. That's my sort of outlook, and I think the outlook's really positive actually. So thanks very much. And before I go, I should just say, a vote of thanks for various people who've been involved in setting this up. So if you just bear with me for a second. So it was on behalf of the CHERI Alliance. I'd like to thank, obviously, SINAM and NCSC for co-hosting this. Thanks very much. So Chris, Holly, Hugo, Reed, team, everybody who's been involved, thanks a lot. It's really huge effort. And Paul. DCID, obviously, a shout out to them for helping, with the funding of the CHERI Alliance, initially getting us that. As Mike said, we want to be in a stage where we're independent, but getting it going, that was really important funding. Some of the DSBD program, so John Goodacre, thanks very much for that support. We appreciate that. Within the CHERI Alliance, the marketing working group, Tora, big shout out for setting up sort of the overall structure of this conference. And actually, the question was asked earlier, if I'm non-technical and I want to do something, how do I get involved and what can I get involved with? Well, that's one great example, right? So the marketing group is a really good way of outreach to get this technology. Remember, this is, this is $6 trillion a year that could be going to better places, right? That's the way I think about it. It's not a sort of academic-y, theoretical thing. So thanks to that. Dan also, who did a lot of the logistics at the CHERI Alliance, full-time now at the CHERI Alliance. So thanks to all those people. Obviously to Mike E. So thanks very much, Mike. Undersung as always, but done a huge job to get all that group of people together in terms of initial membership, and also to bring us here today and to sort of keep hassling it forward. It really much appreciated. And of course, self-included, thanks to all of the speakers and all the exhibitors who have taken part. So just would like to invite everybody to give a round of applause for all the people who've been involved in organizing the event. Thank you. And of course, thanks to everyone who's attended. I hope you've enjoyed the session. It's been positive. We hope to do more things like this. And there will be, for those who need to rush off. But if you don't, there's an opportunity to network. There's food and drinks and nibbles and chance to do some more connecting and collaboration. So please enjoy. Thank you.